What's up, all you Batman loving dudes and dudettes? Toy Shiz here, and I am back yet again to give you guys another retro shiz look back at the past. And today we are going to be talking all about the Mattel 2005 The Batman action figures. Now, yesterday we did take a look at all the Justice League figures: Batman, Robin, Batman himself, and then today we're going to be checking out the villains. Now, there are quite a few to talk about. I was planning on doing one video, but it's way too long, so let's break it up into several parts. So keep this in mind. This is going to be a look at primarily the villains themselves. There were a number of different repaints, variants, multi-packs that had different zany colors to the different villains. This is primarily going to be focused on every single separate character that was given a toy that represents the show. So that's how I'm going to keep it as. That's all I collected, although there were a few here and there where I'm like, that was actually a pretty cool looking figure. Maybe like this Killer Croc, right? But there were a ton of multi-packs, ones you didn't even know were coming out until maybe you kind of saw it online, but mostly it's because you went to the store. There was a ton. There was even a Batman Campbell's mail away. I'm not even joking. But more on that another day. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a nice hot cup of coffee. This is a retro shiz look back at the 2005 Mattel's The Batman Villains Roster Part 1. And of course, we will start off the villain that was immediately kicked off the show as soon as he made his debut. And of course, I'm talking about Bane. This big bruiser was a total knockout. But let me tell you, this guy, for his design, for everything we know now, it was bizarre to see this back in the day. He was a guy with all the tubes sticking out of him. Normal looking guy. Once he activated his venom, all that stuff rushed into his body, and bingo bango, you had this big red monster. It's all the blood and stuff rushing to his skin. It was bizarre looking, but it was cool, especially to see him in action, because he really tossed Batman around and he beat the ever-loving holy heck out of this guy. But I loved his teeth. He's got a mechanism where you kind of push up on his chest, his torso extends, and it pulls his arm up to kind of then bash down on Batman. So very cool to see. I love this guy. I love the artistic, stylistic nature of these sculpts. They're very angular, but they fit the show, and that's my favorite aspect about these. Now I'm moving on to Pamela Lillian Isley. You'll probably know her best as Poison Ivy. They took a different route for this character in the Batman show. She was a younger version, around 15, 16, and best friends with Batgirl, with Barbara Gordon, and I liked her design. She had a whole head full of roses, basically. It's interesting how they did that. But the figure itself, while spot on to the character design from the show, was very limited in articulation. She was mainly kind of a maquette. She had to have a stand to stand, although she will stand pretty much by herself. Again, limited articulation, waist, head, and arms, but she looks great. Scale-wise, not so much. You know, she fits better with Batman, you would say, but not so much Barbara Gordon. But in either case, she was tough to find, but a very cool Poison Ivy. Now, you may think of this character as being Killer Moth. Well, what do we know about Killer Moth? Not too much, right? And he was kind of played for laughs on the Batman until he was mutated into this whatever the heck I'm looking at, and the figure was no different. Although, truth be told, I would have liked to have had the first character and then had this one as well. But Killer Moth is a really cool Batman character. Again, different approach, monstrous, mutated, sort of like Ninja Turtles kind of thing. But the angles, the stylistic, artistic nature of the show is translated so well into plastic. I love the coloring on this guy. He had a little function. If you filled him with water on his little nose right there on the top, yeah, you could squeeze his belly and then he would squirt water, acid, out at Batman. Scale-wise, yeah, it could have been a little bit bigger. I'm just saying he will not stand without the stand, but he is actually a pretty cool toy. Moving on into Mr. Freeze. Again, a very different approach to what we were seeing with Batman the Animated Series. That was the main thing with this show, was you knew these characters in the cartoon for Bruce Timm's incarnation for so long, and then when you saw this, it was different, and it was a jar to the system, right? But after a while, you got used to it, especially with Clancy Brown giving the old voice to that, Mr. Lex Luthor from Superman the Animated Series. He had an ice blade, right? That looked pretty cool. The sculpt was amazing. You could see the body within the costume itself. He's kind of got like an exosuit kind of deal. You can see right through the ice. He's very stylistic. I love this thing. And there was another Ice Blast Mr. Freeze that was released later is basically a variant, right? You could see, they removed the ice so you could see his head. So it's kind of sort of from the show. He had a really nice icy blast effect. There may be a third one as well. I never saw it, and I don't think it exists, but if you know of its existence, please let me know, comment, or send it to me some way, somehow. I would love to see it. But here's just the old-fashioned card art if you want to see it. This is for the later lines of the Batman EXP. You got the bio, you got the cross-sells, so you get to see Clayface and Zap Snap Batman and Blaster Batman and Drill Drive Batman, Zero Matter Batman. Why not, right? But I really like this. It's a very cool, interesting Mr. Freeze. The variant is very cool as well, no pun intended, and he scales well with Batman. So that's the best part. Minimal articulation, but I think you're going to like this Mr. Freeze. Now, what happens when you combine the look of Marilyn Manson with the voice talents of Robert Englund? Well, you get one heck of a really creepy Riddler, and this was the stylistic approach that they went with, and in Toy Farm, he was every bit as terrifying, right? But he's a very interesting character, very much that gaunt sort of Riddler. He did do puzzles, riddles, everything else in the show. He came with a weapon, long question mark with some acidy stuff that would flip out when you push a button. But I really like the sculpt of this guy. It shows off the angular nature of him. I love his hands. They're they're so sculpted well. It's fantastic. I love this figure. He was another one that was kind of hard to find initially. I really like the question mark, the risen sculpt work all over his hands. I love the question mark, his long hair, and he scales expertly with the Batman figure. Do not miss this guy. He is quite the interesting Riddler. Which then finally brings us to the ManBat. Kirk Langstrom on the show. A very cool, interesting ManBat. Totally different from what we were used to, again, with Batman, the animated series. But this Kirk Langstrom was different. You saw him a lot more during the actual show. And if you're wondering why ManBat is like this albino white, it's because Langstrom was like this albino, but it worked. It was creepy, man. But this ManBat figure is so well designed. Back in the day, right? It looks amazing. He's got joints for days, and he works really well. You can get him in a nice flying position. You get his wings out. His wings are like a vinyl type material. They did make a later one with cloth, but I like this one better, and it fits the show. It's more in the show colors and everything else, but expertly done. I love the joints on this guy. If you got a flight stand, it just works so well to give him that flight pose. You can have Batman on top, pummeling him, punch him in the face. The head is great. The body, the way the arms, the wings, everything works. Knockout. It is my favorite figure of the Batman line. This is hands down, you've got to have this one. So that's going to wrap it up for this particular episode for a look back at the 2005, the Batman Mattel series. Now, I will have more videos on the villains later. We do have a number of ones set to go over, but I think breaking it up just works a heck of a lot better. But I'm curious to know what you guys think about these figures. Do you have them? Do you need to get them? Comment below, let me know. Let's talk everything the Batman. And don't forget, this Saturday, August 22nd, is the DC Fandom, all the latest and greatest from DC Comics, from comics to entertainment to movies to cartoons. They're going to be showing off a heck of a lot, and I'll have all the coverage for that. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. As always, drink some great coffee, eat some great food, but most importantly, remember when you have a cartoon that you've been so used to for years and they totally do a 360 on you and they got all these new character designs, give it a chance to see where it goes. You might actually be impressed. And when you do, let me know what you found. I'll talk to you guys soon. Adios.